Hi guys, welcome to my channel Lush Foliage. I hope you guys are fine and are safe. Today we are going to be talking about an extremely beautiful house plant called as the ZZ plant. It's also known as the Zanzibar Gem. Now these are very low maintenance house plants characterized by their shiny, wide, oval shaped leaves that tend to shoot upwards. Now ideally a mature Zanzibar plant will reach up to 3 to 4 feet. Now these are native to Eastern Africa. It's a very beautiful house plant, a very low maintenance plant. Now because these leaves are very shiny, as you can see, they are very shiny and glossy, because of which a lot of times people think that these plants are artificial plants. So now let's talk about this plant in detail, starting with light. Now ZZ plants are tolerant to a wide range of lighting conditions, which means that they are well suited for indoor growing. Now ideally it's said that this plant will do well in low light conditions as well, but actually ZZ plants prefer indirect bright light, but it can also do well in low light. Now if you have an option of indirect bright light, please do keep this plant in indirect bright light. Just because it's said that it can handle low light conditions, that doesn't mean that you're going to push this plant in a dark corner. Remember, if ZZ plants do not get a good amount of light, it will start to stretch. So ensure that you have a spot where there is a good amount of indirect bright light, because this plant also tends to do quite well indoors, so it is a very popular indoor house plant. But always remember, do not expose this plant to direct sunlight, otherwise the leaves will get burnt. Now talking about the soil, ZZ plants are not very picky when it comes to their potting soil. They will do well in any kind of soil as long as the soil is well draining. So ensure that you have a loose, porous and well draining soil. If you feel that your soil is not very well draining, then you can add some perlite and sand. If you want to know a little bit more about the potting mix, I will put the link in the description below. You can check it out, because I tend to use the same type of soil mix for almost all of my foliage plants, all of my flowering plants. Now talking about watering, these plants have very thick rhizomes, due to which these plants are extremely drought tolerant and can handle infrequent watering. That's the reason why you have to wait for the soil to be completely bone dry before you go ahead and water it. And once the soil is completely dry, let's say after 2 weeks your soil is completely bone dry, you will have to do complete watering until the water starts passing through the drain hole. So let's say that if you have forgotten to water for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, it's absolutely fine. The plant will still do quite well. The water that is stored in the rhizomes will provide it to the plant, and the plant will still do quite well. So that is the reason why this is one of the most popular indoor house plant that a lot of people tend to prefer to grow. Now talking about temperature and humidity, our average household temperature and humidity is absolutely fine for our ZZ plants. They do not have any issue with temperature or humidity, because a lot of times these plants are grown indoor, and our average household humidity and temperature is absolutely fine. The room temperature is absolutely fine for the ZZ plant. But do not keep your ZZ plant directly under the air conditioning vent. It should not come in contact with the direct airflow from the air conditioning vent, otherwise it will dry the leaves. So ensure that you keep it in a place wherein the direct air from the air conditioning does not fall onto the plant. Or if you are from a place wherein you tend to use heaters, then do not keep this plant very close to the heater. Keep it away so that the direct heat does not transfer onto the plant. Otherwise the plant is very easy to take care if it is kept inside the house. Talking about fertilizers, this plant does not require a lot of fertilizers. If you do not add fertilizers frequently, the plant will still do quite well without any fertilizers as well. That is why, as I said, it's a very low maintenance plant. But in case if you want to add any fertilizers during the summer season, which is their active growing period, you can go for a liquid based fertilizer, probably a seaweed fertilizer. But always remember, dilute it in a liter of water. Go for 1/4 of the seaweed fertilizer, add it in a liter of water, dilute it, and then give it for your plant. And you can do it probably once in 2 months. That's absolutely fine. The plant will do quite well. Even if you do not add any fertilizers, it's absolutely fine. The plant will still do quite well. Now there are a couple of versions of this plant. Now this is a green ZZ plant. There is a black ZZ plant as well, which is more popular compared to this one, and it's slightly rare and expensive compared to the green ZZ plant. Now talking about propagation, it's pretty simple to propagate a ZZ plant. There are two methods that you can go with. One is the root division. You will need to take out the plant from the pot, divide it from the roots and then put them in individual pots. Now this method is much better than the second method. The second method is a stem cutting method. You have to ensure that the cutting blade, knife or scissor, whatever you're using, should be sterilized, and then you just need to cut the bottom part of the stem. Or whatever stem you have, you can just cut it off, take off the lower leaves, and then you can either put it in water to propagate or you can put it in soil. But if you're putting it in water, you have to ensure that you need to change the water weekly to prevent any bacterial infection, or you can put it in soil. But remember guys, the root division method is much better than stem cutting, because stem cutting is going to take a longer time, because ZZ plants take a lot of time to root. So I would always suggest, if you're doing a stem cutting or if you're doing a root division, the root division method is much easier because it already has roots. But in a stem cutting, it's going to take a slightly longer time. So let's say that after doing a stem cutting, you have put it into the soil. Now ensure that the plant is kept in indirect bright light. Any which ways, we never expose our ZZ plants to direct sunlight, otherwise the leaves will get burned. Now talking about the pot size, you can go with any pot size. Now this is a 5-inch of pot size. Now ideally, ZZ plants are very slow growing plants, so you do not need to repot them very frequently. Now this plant is going to be in this pot for a very long time because they are very slow growing. So ideally they do not need to be frequently repotted. And whenever, let's say that your plant is starting to grow and now the pot is small enough for the plant, either you can do a propagation by cutting off the stem, or if you do not want to do any cutting, you will have to move to the next bigger pot. Now let's say that this is a 5-inch pot. If I have to repot it, I will move to the next bigger pot, which would be a 6-inch pot. Do not go for a very large pot when you're repotting it. You have to go to the next bigger size of the pot. Now pests are not much of an issue when it comes to ZZ plant, because as I said, they have these waxy leaves. Usually they don't get affected with mealybugs, scale insects, spider mites, or any insects for that matter. But in case if your plant does get affected, you can go for any organic solution. Another important thing, because the leaves are very shiny, they are very glossy, waxy, there is a high chance that the plant will have dust that tends to settle on the leaves. So just take a soft bristled makeup brush and just clean off the leaves, because that's very important. If there is dust covered on the leaves, it might affect the plant from doing photosynthesis. So it's very important that you clean the dust off the leaves. Now talking about, is this plant toxic? Yes, this plant is toxic to humans and pets both. So it is mildly toxic. So ensure that you keep this plant away from reach of small children and your pets, because if these leaves are ingested, it could lead to problems. So guys, I hope that this video on ZZ plant was helpful to you. If it was, please hit the like button. If you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing to it. Until then, take care, stay safe and keep planting.